All right, well, it's time now for a look at what the international press is leading with this Tuesday. And for that, I'm joined by Elena Casas. Morning
Hello
to you.
again.
Hi there. Now, one story on pretty much every single front page this Tuesday.
Yep. The Guardian leads with the manhunt for Gaddafi, independent Gaddafi on the brink as rebels surround Tripoli. The Times just simply, where is Gaddafi? And the Telegraph, bloody battle for Tripoli, and those are headlines pretty much reflected across the world. But for some analysis, let's first go to Egypt in the English language blog The Arabist. They're looking at Libya after Gaddafi. The writer points out there's a number of key issues that the National Transitional Council has got to deal with if they want to avoid the victory degenerating into a conflict. Firstly, what to do with Gaddafi's former soldiers and the civilians who are loyal to them, how to avoid revenge attacks and stop conflicting factions taking advantage of the chaos to attack one another. Then there's the question of how much external influence there'll be in any new government. NATO influence has, of course, been vital in winning the conflict over Gaddafi, but now the writer is afraid the country's oil wealth could attract too much Western interference in any new government. But at the same time, he suggests that some kind of NATO peacekeeping troops might actually be needed to try and keep the calm on the ground in what's sure to be quite a chaotic transition and stop different ethnic and religious groups who have long had grudges against one another from taking advantage of this to attack each other.
All right, and commentators are also drawing lessons from the situation in Libya and saying how they could be applied perhaps to future interventions.
Yes, let's look at a piece in The Atlantic by the Middle East researcher Shadi Hamid. He says those who fought for intervention in Libya have been proved right, and those who believe more generally that Western democracies have a responsibility to intervene to protect civilians around the world have also been proved right. He says this is a perfect example of a fair transition well carried out. The National Transitional Council has accepted a framework for democracy. They don't seem to be carrying out revenge attacks on Gaddafi loyalists, and the NATO allow the rebels themselves to take the initiative to enter Tripoli. So it really is them and not NATO who can take credit for the victory. And so it provides a template for future humanitarian interventions in war-torn countries, he says. And he even suggests the example could and should be followed in Syria.
But The Guardian is saying not so fast. Perhaps that example wouldn't hold up necessarily everywhere.
No, their Middle East commentator Brian Whitaker says Bashar al-Assad will not be losing sleep over this. He says it's nearly impossible NATO will intervene in strategically important Syria, which still has powerful friends. He says for Arab rulers, Gaddafi was a troublesome eccentric who had insulted most of them at some point in the past, and they won't lament his passing.
All right, well, one group watching the Libya unfold with great interest, of course, the oil companies.
Yes, according to the New York Times, they're all already scrambling for influence with the National Transitional Council, which has apparently held meetings with BP, France's Total and Italy's Eni, who were the biggest producers in the country before the conflict broke out. So the NTC clearly knows which side its bread is buttered. It looks like political considerations will be key in finding out who gets that oil. They say that British, Italian and French companies will get priority because those countries backed the intervention. Brazilian, Russian and Chinese ones, though, will probably lose out.
Very briefly, Strauss Kahn making the press.
Very briefly, it makes the headline of the New York Post, who have got juicy gossip details about it, and also in the New Yorker, they explain a little bit more about just why the charges have been dropped so quickly. Pointed out the New York prosecutor is an elected official who is really only keen to pursue cases that will definitely go to a conviction.
All right, Elena Casas, thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to date.